Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to Rockaway Fridays with the Wave. This is a special Rockaway Fridays with the Wave as we have our columnist. He's more famous for other things, but I love that he's a columnist. I love sharing the sports page with him. John Jastremski. Hey, JJ, welcome to the show, buddy.
Mark, it's a pleasure to be on, man. It's been quite the chaotic week, but only I could get in the way of Syracuse going to the Sweet 16. I would be the only one stupid enough to do that, but that's the way the cookie crumbles, my man.
Well, obviously, if folks are listening or watching who don't know, you've actually made a pretty big decision. So why don't you let the readers and the audience know that this decision that you've made?
Yeah, listen, I've been at FAN for a long time now. It would be going on 10 years, September of 2011, and it's always going to be home. It's always going to have a special place in my heart. But I'm starting something new. Bill Simmons, about 4 months ago, approached me about an exciting endeavor in which I'm going to take my talents over to the podcast world, where I'm going to be doing. And this is one of the great misconceptions, Mark, that's out there. People think I'm going to do gambling stuff. No, not exactly. I'm doing a lot of the same stuff I'm doing now. It will be my podcast, New York-based, New York-centric, same sort of topics that I've been doing for the last 9 years. Of course, the gambling element, like it is on my FAN show, will be mixed in and will be involved. But it's basically taking JJ After Dark to the ringer, with the backing of Bill Simmons, with a whole lot of resources at our disposal. And bro, I'm ready to hit the ground running. I am super fired up about it.
Well, look, I'm really excited for you. I mean, as someone who has I've always been I always had the overnight guys special in my heart, as someone who was in the business, who had a great relationship with Joe Beningos, have a great relationship with Joe, loved the overnight, worked the overnight. So always had a special relationship with guys who worked on the overnight. So, it's just, such a great opportunity when we started working together at the Wave, and you became a columnist and all that stuff. So, as someone who, when I left Sirius, it was a major decision. I wasn't sure what was coming next. There has to be some kind of, there had to be some kind of major decision-making process. And so how did you come to the conclusion, and who did you talk to? I mean, for you, it must have been a very hard decision to make because of how you came to FAN in the first place.
No doubt about it, Mark. Listen, when the idea first came my way, as excited as I was, as intrigued as I was, yeah, you got to go through a lot of different things in your mind about where you're at, about where you're going, and where your future may be. And listen, FAN was a place that was great to me. They gave me my start. They gave me my opportunity. I don't think I'd be in the position that I'm in today if it wasn't for that start that I got from Mark Chernoff and all the folks over there. But yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest selling point, hands down, was Bill Simmons, because first of all, I think he's an innovator. I think he has always been a guy that in many ways has been one step ahead of the curve. And I think his results and his resume and his bank account kind of speak for itself. So when somebody like that comes to you with an idea, it's eye-opening. And listen, I'm in a good place. Let's put it this way, I wasn't actively looking to leave WFAN. It needed to be something that was going to wow me, not just from a comfort level, not just from, a lifestyle level. The opportunity had to be there. I would not be doing this to go on some independent venture. I'm going to a place where I feel it's very secure. I feel like their growth is through the roof. And you would have asked me this question 5 years ago, Mark, the idea of going to a podcast company would have sounded outrageous. It would have sounded like one of the craziest ideas known to man. But look at the industry. Look at where it's going. And I see the way Bill takes care of his folks, the way he is able to build talent and build a network. And I think I can do what I do, bring it there, and keep that New York twang and that New York feel all in one. So that basically is what sold me on this opportunity.
The other thing that's interesting to me, as someone who, has worked in this business a little bit, certainly not at the level you are, but, in the periphery, when there's been a lot of coverage of this decision for you and a lot of coverage of some of the machinations that have been going on behind the scenes at WFAN. And this, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on this show was, our audience, our readers love the fact that you write for the Wave. They love it.
Nice. That's good to know. I'm very happy to hear that.
I mean, Ray Van, our community news editor, he went out of his way. He goes, man, this is so cool that JJ writes for us. And the people were telling him how cool they thought it was. So, sharing that sports page with you has always been a privilege for me. And the fact that you're going to continue to do that is awesome. It's great news. But one of the really interesting things about this is that the coverage of your decision, the coverage of the last few months at the way at WFAN, I want to give you the opportunity to kind of set the record straight, because some things have been written and some things, I know that a lot of the decisions that you've had to make over the last 6 months have been tough ones, especially with the upheaval with Mike Francesa leaving. And I know that he meant a lot to you during his tenure there. He certainly took a shine to you as a protege. And, the decision-making process for you, are there things that you want to set the record straight on as far as what's been written about this whole process?
Yeah, I'm glad that you're bringing this up. Yeah, I appreciate that, Heels. First of all, let me make something perfectly clear, and I think you know this, but for anybody who's listening right now, the idea and the narrative that I could not work with somebody or that I didn't want to work with a partner is the biggest bunch of crap known to man. So I want that thrown out there. Anybody who said, listen, I enjoy working solo. I have obviously developed my niche and I've developed my craft working solo, because listen, they don't normally start you with a partner unless, you're established or you're an athlete and you need that sort of radio guy to work with. I've worked with plenty of partners, from Evan Roberts, who I love working with, Chris Moore, who I love working with, Kim Jones, who I love working with. I had fun working with Bart Scott, Brian Jones. I could go on and on and on. The narrative that's out there that I could not work with the partner and that I told management I'm not working with a partner is BS. So I'm glad that we got that out of the way. That's number one. Number two, I made it clear to management, and this is on the record, off the record, I really don't care. I need to be able to do a show a certain way. I am not sitting down for an hour and a half doing Zoom meetings. I am not going to be in a position where we are rehearsing a show before we are doing a show. Right. I expect if it's a co-host of mine, they're going to be prepared. Obviously, we're not going to agree on everything. That's fine. That's part of the give and take. The idea of me doing a show before a show is just unacceptable. It's not good radio. It doesn't make sense. And yeah, I made that pretty clear to them. That is something for me that's a non-starter and that I'm not interested in doing. So I hope that covers it, Mark. I'm more than happy to share, my friend. So if there's anything else I got to share, let me know.
One of the things I've always liked about you, JJ, is that, you're a straight shooter, and what people don't realize, I think, first of all, the listeners will always know if what you're doing is contrived. They're always going to know, how many times we've seen people try to do a show or a podcast or a radio show thinking that they're smarter than the audience. You get a few yo-yos that call up and say dopey things, but they're going to know if what you're doing is not legit, so your knowledge, your recall, the things that mean a lot to you, they mean a lot to the listeners. That's why you have the following that you have. And that's why Bill Simmons, let's be honest, that's why Bill reached out and recruited you. So that's got to be really cool. Just to, rehash that a little bit. It's got to be cool when somebody who's been that successful, reaches out and says, hey man, we want you on our team. That had to be really cool. That had to be a really special moment for you. Yes.
Oh, no doubt about it. And listen, Mark, I'm not at the point now where I'm writing This Is Your Life, John Jastremski, but my goodness, I'm going to have one hell of a book to write. So maybe in like 20 or 30 years, God willing, you're still here. We may have to talk shop and try to figure out a way to get that story out there because, listen, from dealing with Mike, a guy that I loved listening to for all these years, having a chance to have a relationship with him, and with Bill, I was a big BS podcast guy from the beginning. Guest the Lines with Cousin Sal, something that I really listened to and gravitated towards throughout my college years. So, yeah, when you have guys like that appreciating what you bring to the table, it means a lot. Yeah, it's super, super cool. And just the amount of people who reached out in the business that I've come into contact with. I'm not going to name names because, listen, nobody wants to hear me name drop on the podcast for the next 35 to 40 minutes. But some of the people that reached out to me, Mark, it was like, holy smokes, man. Really, really nice of them to do and something they didn't have to do. So, yeah, I mean, when people who have had the success that Mike has had or that Bill has had take a liking and an interest to you, it's like pinch yourself type stuff for sure.
So, not everyone who is a radio host, because I want to talk about the column a little bit, because not everybody who's a radio host has the ability to write a column. And I look forward to my inbox, every week when I get your column, because a lot of times I'm like, well, what is he writing about? Because I can't write the same thing. I don't want to write the same thing.
I hope I'm not stealing your material ever.
No.
You just got to let me know. I mean, listen, if you're really fired up to write about the Mets, I'll take off for a week. I promise.
No, it's all good.
I'll do something else.
Good. People would much rather hear from you than they would from me.
I don't know about that. Debatable.
But I do get a kick every week out of reading that. And, that's not just because you are who you are. It's just that as an editor, I read thousands and thousands and thousands of words a day. So when I actually am looking forward to reading something from someone, that tells me that you obviously have an ability. Like, when did that start? You're wanting to write a column and add that aspect to your journalism career, because let's be honest, most people that go into broadcasting don't necessarily, embrace that writing part of it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'll admit, when I was in college, aside from writing papers and whatnot, Mark, I didn't do a lot of writing. Like, I didn't work for the Daily Orange at Syracuse. I was working for the radio station. I didn't even dabble much into television, which, to be honest, I don't want to say it's a regret, because, listen, you live and you learn. That's part of life. That's part of the process. But it's what I tell young broadcasters and young writers and young TV people all the time when I do these, Q&As, when I do these Zooms or whatever, is when you're young, when you're 19, 20, 21 years old, diversify. Right. Give yourself an opportunity to do a little bit of everything. Look at these guys now who started as writers and now are on television all the time on ESPN. Bill Simmons, he started out as a writer and transition his career into doing a bunch of other stuff. I think the best thing for a lot of different people is embrace doing a lot of different things, because then you really get a sense for, all right, this is what it takes to be in television. This is what it takes to have a successful writing career. This is what it takes if you're going to do radio and whatnot. So for me, I kind of just learned by doing. I mean, that might sound like cliche and it might sound a little bit lame, but in all seriousness, Mark, I mean, for me, I did some freelance writing before I started at the Fan. So I was doing some coverage, high school games, Jersey Shore, a whole lot of summers writing a story and then finding your way to beat the clock at around 11 o'clock at night. But it was fun. I mean, it was a different challenge for me. So when I do a column, I know I have, whatever it may be, 700 words, 500 words, 1,000 words to try to get to a point. But I try to make my writing style, I think, sound like I'm talking to you. Now, sometimes may not be as grammatically correct, me and you right now, as it might be in words. Right. But that is definitely something that I try to do. I try to make it out to be, you're listening to JJ on the air, and you kind of feel his voice when you're reading his column.
No, definitely. And I think that, look, when I used to teach journalism, I used to tell my students, if you have the time and the space, the narrative style of writing is always the best because it engages the reader. And part of what we do as journalists is we're not just engaging, We're not just educating, but when we can, we want to entertain people. So, I've read stuff that you've written and laughed out loud because it's funny, like, especially when you're like trying to make sense of some weird, media thing that some sports, either an athlete or broadcaster is talking about. And you're like, wait a minute, that makes no sense, and you're right. I can hear it in I can hear your voice as I'm reading this stuff. So look, it's a skill, and you're absolutely right when you're giving advice to young people that are getting into this business. Media today is just like Hollywood was in the 30s. Even if you could act, you still had to know how to dance. Even if you could sing, you still had to know how to act. So being able to write, to be on camera, to be on the air, and to be able to do all those different things makes you versatile. And so much of what we do today, JJ, is hybrid, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We have to be
it's
able
so
to
different.
do different things.
And Mark, you've been in the business a long time. Think about how much the business has changed from 5 years ago to 10 years ago to 20 years ago.
Right.
It's insane. It's absolutely insane. And listen, I think in many ways that kind of brings it full circle to my next move, because I've realized in some ways the business has changed quite a bit from what it was 5 years ago to what it is right now. It's very, very different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the other thing I wanted to ask you is that, when people found out, because people know that, that you work for the Wave and that you've done stuff with me, they're always like, oh, so what is JJ? What's going to change with JJ? He's not going to be on FAN anymore. Where am I going to be able to, do I have to get Spotify? I mean, what's changing for you as far as all this other stuff that you've done, all the other platforms that you're on? How's that? Has the Ringer told you that you can't do anything else?
Here's the great news about my next chapter, Mark. Everything I am doing right now will continue as is. SNY, you'll see me on SNY. Golf Channel, you'll see me on the Golf Channel. The Wave, you like reading my column every Friday, right? Comes out on Friday.
Right. That's
you
right.
You don't got to worry about that. The column will be out there. And for a lot of the folks out there who are wondering, how do I listen? Do I have to pay to listen? No, and no. I can't stress that enough. Everybody's got a smartphone now. Everybody. I mean, even my mom and dad have a smartphone right now, and they're learning how to do it. You go to Spotify, you go to Apple Podcasts, you go to any of these podcasts, you search my name, you subscribe, you'll get the podcast. And what is going to be so cool about this, Mark, is that we're going to beat everybody as far as immediacy. There's a big event. We're going to be up at midnight. I'm not going to wait until 8 a.m. or business hours to do it. You know this. I'm used to working anytime, any place, anywhere. The Mets and the Yankees are playing in October in the postseason. We are going to be live with a podcast by midnight or 1 o'clock. So that immediacy and that ability to turn it around ASAP, I'm fired up about that, because it's going to be whenever you want it, on demand, the way people like to consume media these days. People want everything basically at the palms of their fingertips. And
right.
You'll have that with this podcast. And you don't have to pay. And trust me, it's not going to be that hard to find. I promise you that.
And that's, it's such a great thing, the accessibility to the user, the accessibility to the fan, so that people can get, that kind of content. I mean, I don't know how many times, I'm listening to something and I'm like, I'd much rather hear so-and-so, I'd much rather hear what, I know that people, I know when I used to listen to the Overnight and Joe Beningo was on, and, the Knicks, like when the Knicks drafted Frederick Weiss, I mean, that's classic radio. I mean, I remember it. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how old I don't know how old you were when that happened.
Remember it vividly. I don't know if I remember Joe's show, but I do remember yelling and screaming because I wanted Ron Artest badly out of St. John's.
JJ.
We'll never know what happened. Oh, man.
It was so hilarious.
When you equate,
he doesn't even talk during the intro. He was so disgusted. All you heard was music and silence.
Was it more of a meltdown than some of the Jet losses over the years when you equate it to that?
I was working overnights at WRKL up in Rockland County when after the Ray Lucas game, when Joe was going nuts about Ray Lucas being in the game. and Francesca called the show at like 2:30 in the morning to yell at Joe about like Parcells. It was classic. And that's what you're talking about, that immediacy. Because I know that I've had people tell me that I can't wait to hear what JJ has to say about this, especially when it's a team that's close to your heart, like the Yankees, like with Syracuse. People are geared up when you have a following like that, that's such a key thing for you. So you got to have listeners and callers and people that that you want to hear from them. Is there going to be the ability to call into the podcast?
Yes.
Is that going to be something that
yes.
people can do?
So right out of the gate, Mark, we will have voicemail capability, meaning
Nice.
It won't be back and forth, but you will be able to leave a voicemail. Now, we'll see what happens in the days and the weeks and the months ahead, but I think that's going to be a big element for me, having those every show, being able to react to them, and then you kind of go from there. It's a little different. It's not exactly the same as it was, but that is something that I've been very mindful of here in making this jump, is that I want the listener and I want the viewer involved as much as possible. And that means voicemails, tweets, Instagram, all that stuff will be a major part of what we're going to do.
The other thing too is that you're always willing to be a part of other people's programs. Obviously, you've been on here, you've been on this podcast a couple of times. My son hosted a podcast the other day, and you were very, very, very gracious enough to hop on with him. He was so excited. So thank you again for that. But I think I guess the point is that in this new frontier that you're going on for yourself professionally, I can't say this enough, how excited I am for you and how important of a decision you've made here. I think that it's really groundbreaking to see this. And I wish you all the best, man. I really think that this is going to be an awesome thing for you. And I wish you all the success in the world.
Well, Mark, that's very kind of you to say. I'm super stoked about it. I can't wait to hit the ground running. I have so many ideas going through my mind day after day after day. So we'll finish strong at the Fan over the next 2 weeks. But 4-5, ringer, name, all that good stuff, TBA. Stay tuned. And I promise you we'll have some good stuff on the horizon.
And then hopefully when, we'll be able to let people know in the column every week, what's new, what's cooking, and the things that you'll be able to share with them via the column will be a great thing too.
Tremendous. Subscribe. That is what I'm going to be telling y'all. Subscribe. Simple as that. And listen, if my mom can do it, anybody can do it. Trust me on that.
All right, JJ. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. You take care.
You got it, Heels. Thanks, man.